What if everything you've been taught about aging is wrong? Modern medicine has extended human life significantly. We have drugs for cholesterol, surgery for failing hearts, treatments for cancers that would have been fatal a generation ago. By almost every measure, we are living longer than our ancestors. And yet, in most developed countries, those extra years are not necessarily good. Years. More time alive, yes, but often more time in hospitals on medications, with chronic pain, with diminished capacity, waiting for the end. Japan, and specifically one small island at the southern tip of Japan, tells a completely different story. Okinawa, Japan, was once home to the highest concentration of centenarians, people who live past 100 years old anywhere on Earth. And these weren't centenarians lying in hospital beds. They were gardening into their 90s, dancing into their hundreds, sharp, social, purposeful, and alive in ways that made researchers from around the world get on planes to find out why. What they found changed how scientists think about aging entirely. Let's talk about the Okinawa secret. First, some context. Okinawa is a small island, subtropical, geographically isolated from mainland Japan for most of its history. It has its own distinct culture, its own dialect, its own cuisine. And for most of the 20th century, it had the highest life expectancy of any population on Earth. In the 1970s and 80s, a team of researchers led by Dr. Makoto Suzuki began one of the longest-running studies of longevity in history, the Okinawa Centenarian Study. They tracked hundreds of centenarians over decades, measuring everything, from their diet to their blood pressure to their social relationships to their sense of purpose. What they found was not one secret. It was a system, a way of living that taken together produced extraordinary results. Let's go through the key elements. The first element is diet, but probably not in the way you expect. The traditional Okinawan diet is based primarily on sweet potatoes, which accounted for roughly 60% of calories for much of the 20th century. Not white rice, which is the staple of mainland Japan. Sweet potatoes. Beyond sweet potatoes, the diet includes abundant vegetables, especially bitter. Melon, known in Okinawa as Goya tofu, small amounts of fish, seaweed, and very little meat or dairy. The diet is naturally low in calories, low in saturated fat, high in fiber, and rich in antioxidants. But the most interesting finding wasn't what the Okinawans ate. It was how much they ate. The Okinawans practiced something called Hara Hachi Bu, a Confucian teaching. That means eat until you are 80% full, not stuffed. Not satisfied in the way most modern eaters aim for. Just not hungry anymore. This practice, maintained consistently over a lifetime, results in a chronic, caloric restriction that researchers now believe is one of the most powerful longevity interventions known to science. Caloric restriction has been shown in dozens of studies across multiple species to extend healthy lifespan by reducing oxidative stress, slowing cellular aging, and improving metabolic function. The Okinawans didn't know any of this. They just followed a cultural teaching that said don't overeat. The second element is movement, but again, not in the way you might expect. The centenarians of Okinawa were not marathon runners. They didn't go to gyms. They didn't have exercise routines. What they had was a lifestyle that required constant, gentle, low-intensity physical activity. They gardened. They walked. They cooked from scratch. They got up and down from floor-level seating dozens of times per day, an action that, researchers noted, requires significant leg strength and balance and serves as a form of functional fitness training. This kind of movement, consistent, purposeful, integrated into daily life, rather, then separated from it, turns out to be far more beneficial for longevity than intense exercise followed by hours of sitting. The Okinawan elders moved their bodies all day long every day for their entire lives. The third element, and the one researchers consider the most surprising, is social connection. Okinawa has a cultural institution called Moai. A Moai is a group of 5 or so, friends who commit to each other for life. They meet regularly, support each other financially in times of need, and most importantly, show up for each other emotionally, in hard times and good times, for decades. The centenarians of Okinawa almost universally had a strong Moai. They had people who knew them deeply, who depended on them, and who they depended on in return. This matters because loneliness, researchers now know, is as dangerous to health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Social isolation accelerates cognitive decline, increases inflammation, disrupts sleep, and shortens life. The Okinawans had the opposite of isolation. They had lifelong, committed community, and it showed in their health. The fourth element is purpose, what the Okinawans call Ikigai. We've talked about Ikigai before on this channel, but it's worth revisiting in this context because the Okinawan elders didn't just know their Ikigai abstractly. They lived it actively every day, well into old age. Many of the centenarians in the study were still working, not because they had to, but because they had something they cared about doing. Still teaching, still fishing, still practicing traditional crafts, still running the local community. Events. Purpose, researchers found, was directly correlated with longevity. People who had a strong sense of why they got up in the morning lived longer with better cognitive function than those who didn't. Ikigai was not a concept for the Okinawans. It was a practice, an ongoing engagement with life. The fifth element is stress management, specifically the Okinawan approach to what they call Nankurunaisa. Nankurunaisa is an Okinawan phrase that roughly translates as things will work out. It reflects a fundamental orientation toward life that is neither passive nor anxious, but trusting and present. The Okinawan elders studied had remarkably low levels of chronic stress compared to Western populations. They prayed regularly. They maintained daily rituals. They honored their ancestors and their community. They had a framework for understanding hardship that didn't send them into panic or despair. Chronic stress, researchers now know, is enormously damaging to the body over time. It raises cortisol, increases inflammation, damages the immune system, and accelerates cellular aging. The Okinawans, without any formal stress reduction program, had culturally embedded practices that kept chronic stress remarkably low throughout their lives. Now here's the part of this story that is both fascinating and sobering. Okinawa is no longer the longevity capital of the world. Starting in the 1970s and accelerating through the 1980s and 90s, American fast food arrived in Okinawa. American military bases brought American eating habits. McDonald's, Burger King, the processed food culture of the modern West. The younger generations of Okinawans began eating more meat, more sugar, more processed food, and less sweet potato. And the results were dramatic. Within 2 generations, Okinawan men had dropped from first to worst in longevity rankings among Japan's prefectures. Obesity rates rose. Diabetes rates rose. The centenarian advantage began to erode. The message is clear: it wasn't genetics. It was lifestyle. The Okinawan elders lived as long as they did because of how they lived, not because of something in their DNA that you can't access. And that means the principles that governed their extraordinary longevity are available to anyone willing to adopt them. So what can you actually do? Eat mostly plants. Stop before you're full. Move your body gently and consistently throughout the day. Invest in deep, committed friendships, not followers, not contacts, but people who actually know you. Find something that gives your life meaning and keep doing it for as long as you can. And when things get hard, remember Nankurunaisa. Things will work out. Before I close, I want to share one detail from the study that stuck with me. The researchers asked the centenarians what they considered the most important thing in their lives. Not one mentioned money. Not one mentioned career or status. Almost universally, they mentioned their relationships, their community, the people they loved. One 102-year-old woman said simply, "I have never eaten alone." Think about that. Every meal shared. Every day in the company of people she cared about for over a century. We live in a world that tells us success is individual. We eat at our desks, scroll our phones at dinner, and call ourselves busy when really we're just isolated. The centenarians of Okinawa offer a different vision. A life embedded in community, sustained by purpose, nourished by simple food and gentle movement. It's not complicated. It's just different from how most of us are living. One final thought. The researchers who spent decades in Okinawa came away with a surprising conclusion. These were not extraordinary people. Ordinary people living in a way aligned with what the human body actually needs. Community, purpose, movement. Simple food, acceptance. The extraordinary outcome was a product of ordinary daily choices repeated across a lifetime. It's not reserved for a special island. It's available to you starting today.